We'll pull up a couple ancient Chinese landscape scrolls here. And I'm going to be talking about a bunch of different comics tonight. And we'll look at them. I'll look at them not as an expert art historian. I'm not a trained art historian, but I am a cartoonist. And I want to look at these historic visual narratives. They're really comics throughout all world history and from a lot of different cultures. So these Chinese landscape scrolls, I'm going to approach it as a cartoonist here, reading a story. I actually don't read Chinese, but I'm told there are the signatures and stamps of collectors and other artists or poets on these scrolls sometimes. So this is a scroll called Twin Pines. It's thought to be painted around 1310, the year 1310. And it's meant to be read right to left. So it is a story here. So as we read across, let's see what I find here. I come to some rocks, and I love how the ink brush creates these rocks just by kind of playing across the page like that. It reminds me of our blob doodles we've been doing in comics camp. And let's see here. I come to these rocks. I come to these pine trees that are really detailed. Every needle is painted onto those pine trees with the ink brush, every branch. And then the pine trees seem to be looking out over this lake. And I love how the lake itself, like the sky, is really negative space. It's not painted on this silk. It's actually the hills in the distance are painted on, and a couple little lines that, because I had the suggestion of these trees up close, I see those lines as detailed trees on cliffs and hills, and they're far, far away across all this water, which is really empty space on the not the paper, the silk here. And then as you look out across the lake, suddenly your attention falls on one little boat out there in the middle of the vast empty space there, and one little fellow fishing in the lake with a fishing pole just dipping in the water. And then there's more inscriptions added on at the end, poetics or commentary or something like that. I love that kind of experience of like moving from one side to the other and exploring the space and discovering something. That to me is kind of the narrative of these scrolls. I'll show you one more scroll here that I really like to look at in these presentations. So this is from the year 1669. This one's called Colors of Mount Taihang. I don't know if my pronunciation is correct on any of these, but again, we have commentary and poetry and captions and things added on after. But this one gives us a sense of a journey by bringing us in across a waterfall, bringing us up a mountain stream, and we can see where the stream is coming from up in the mountains in the distance. And we're kind of invited in at this point, because look who's on the bridge there. Two little figures. Maybe you see yourself as riding the donkey. Maybe you see yourself as guiding it over this rickety bridge with the water flowing under you, right? But that's kind of your invitation to start out on a journey, cross that bridge, cross that river, and enter up into these mountain pathways. And as we move up into those hills, I notice that every leaf is, I almost said stitched because I've been looking at embroideries lately. Every leaf is carefully painted onto every branch. And then in the distance, we get hints of that level of detail. So we get this sense of this super realistic world that we're entering into, even though the characters in that world are actually super simple, almost like little stick figures with robes on, right? And then we enter into this world with depth and distance. And then off in the distance, look at that. There's a simplified, just like the characters are super simplified. The little temple, the little pagoda is super simplified out there. And then the hillside around it is super detailed. And there's some clouds entering in. So there's a sense of empty space, negative space here that gives us a sense of distance too, even though this is, 300 plus years later. And those roof lines and the buildings, I almost feel like if I got close enough, I could climb through a window or a door and enter into these buildings, right? So they're kind of united in their simplicity in this super detailed world. As we keep going along this ridge on our journey, we start to realize this world stretches off into the distance. And there are mountains upon mountains beyond mountains out there in this huge, vast distance. Maybe there's a lake or a sea out there under those clouds. And I love how the most distant mountains out there, again, are really just brushstrokes playing across the silk. And we end with more commentary or verse and stamps of collectors and owners and people like that. So there we go. There's another reading experience, another journey that we can take along these scrolls, right? So I'm coming back now. I'm coming back to my desk, actually. Let me call up another screen share. I'm going to share the screen of my little camera right above my desk. It'll take me a moment to find it. Here we go. All right. So I have this paper in front of me, and I'm going to try some of those techniques. This is like the Comics Camp component of what I'm doing as I'm getting ready tonight. Tonight we'll be looking at historical comics from the point of view of readers, modern readers, and what do they tell us about the cultures that we're looking at. This week in Comics Camp, we're looking at comics drawn from poems. So I'm kind of mixing it up a little bit here. I've been reading all about Henry David Thoreau's adventures with loons, right? And I found a line in Henry David Thoreau's poetry that I thought we could convert into maybe a journey across the page, sort of in the style of those Chinese landscape scrolls. Because one thing I've noticed when I'm drawing my loontoons, I'm filling up the page with all this writing and all this detail and all these actions. And I kind of like that sense of keeping a sense of emptiness in the page too. Because when you're out looking for loons on the lakes, you know, there's a lot of emptiness and quiet and open space there, if not emptiness. All right, so what I'm looking at here, I'm thinking this is a huge lake, right? And we're going to try that technique. I think we'll move left to right because I'm more used to going left to right. And I'll even work a little poetry in along the lines of that commentary. So Henry David Thoreau's line here is, "I know the world where land and water meet," and that just made me think of the loons, except I want to add something in. I want to start off with the commentary or the verse. Just write it up here. I know the world, and that's kind of a nice phrase right there. I know the world. I'll keep my handwriting kind of loose because that commentary on those scrolls was really beautiful and loose. I'm going to add in sky because those loons fly. Where sky and land. And we'll bring them over here and water meet. So we'll kind of dance across this space. And there's going to be mostly emptiness, but I want to build a sense of big space, sort of along the lines of those, those scrolls that we just looked at. All right, so here's our verse. And I'm thinking I'll put a loon in on this side. So I don't need to draw the whole lake because remember, I'm going to use sort of emptiness to be the lake itself. So remember how we draw our loontoons. We'll put a little band on here, put a little beak on here. I'm not going to look under the water to see the legs. I'm just going to see it floating. Actually, loons float so low in the water. Let's bring that one down a little bit. There we go. And I'll ink it in after. So there's our loon in the distance. And let's see, maybe there's like a couple trees or rocks here, bushes. But I won't actually draw anything else. It's like it's a misty lake here. Maybe we'll continue that line over here and have the other side of the lake with a couple rocks, a couple reeds. Ooh, I kind of like how that, just hinting on this side and hinting on this side and letting the reader kind of make the connection by reading down. It's like we're coming into land on the lake or something, actually. That's pretty cool. Sometimes just moving the reader creates an idea of action in the reader's mind. Maybe I'll build up some woods here. I like doing these sort of scribble trees where you do a line and branches. And that's sort of like if I were using ink with a brush and not penciling at all, you know, I might be sort of creating similar shapes. Those rocks are inspiring on Twin Pines. It's a 700-plus-year-old scroll, and we can learn so much from those artists from all these artists from around the world. That artist especially. Maybe there's like a little outcropping of rocks here. Loons like a lot of the world where sky and land and water meet, right? Let's see. Maybe we'll put a loon flying up here. Remember, we just do that teardrop body, head coming out, wings. There we go. Do one flying through the air. Maybe up here, up closer, there's like some heavier grass, right? It's darker because it's closer to us. We'll just sort of scribble it in there. I feel liberated by seeing an artist who just kind of lets the brush flow across the scroll like that. It's really liberating. I'm thinking over here, we'll build a loon nest. Remember how we do those loon nests in Loontoons? And we'll put some bushes around it. Again, scribbling. Maybe I'll get out my marker and really scribble there. So it's like twin pines. It's up close looking out across the lake. And maybe teardrop head. Maybe this loon's pointing out towards that other loon. So it's like looking out, coming into land. We get all these sort of diagonals. You kind of pick that up in the twin pines, right? Where you're looking from the twin pines out towards the little guy in the boat fishing. I'm going to give this loon the S-curve treatment on the neck. That makes for a really relaxed neck. Give her a band. Let's put some little chicks in this nest too. Well, growing chicks by this point in the summer, right? So I like to do this as a cartoonist. I can combine like things I'm reading, things I'm studying, and artwork that I see from 700 years ago. You can learn from these artists and put them into your comics and give people a sense of like moving through space. I hope we're capturing a little bit of those landscape scrolls. Oh, the other thing I really liked was just hinting at mountains with some sort of playful brush strokes. And that sort of makes me, if you've ever been out in the White Mountains on a lake with mist all over, and you've seen the mountains rising above the mist, I think that's what those artists were looking for in those scrolls. So that gives me a start. That gives me a way to sort of play with these landscape scrolls. Let's go back to that now that we've played with that a little bit. Let me, just for fun, let me share that scroll picture again. There we are. And let's see what we see in it now. Let's go back actually to that one. So there's our close-up foreground. It's darker. In the distance, oh, this artist did more trees and things. I could add a little bit of detail to my mountains in the distance too. When they get really distant, they're just faint lines. Looks like the brush was running out of ink. That's a cool effect. And then there is sort of a horizon line there in the very distance. And instead of a little person in a boat, we have a loon floating out there in the water. I guess my loon could be a little smaller, but that's all right. Cool. So there you go. There's a couple items that will actually be featuring in tonight's presentation. I won't be drawing tonight in the presentation, but we will be looking at comics from many more places besides ancient China. That's Comics in World History and Cultures at 6 to 7 tonight, hosted by BrentwoodLibrary.org, the Brentwood, New Hampshire Public Library. And I posted the link with this video, so you can get over to the Facebook event, or it's also on my Patreon. Free and open to the public. Thank you, New Hampshire Humanities, Humanities to Go program for making this possible. And we'll be looking at a lot of cool artwork. Hope you can join us. Have a great afternoon, everybody. Thanks for stopping by.